Happy spring, everyone. Okay. This first song, thank you. This first song is in honor of Women's History Month. We're at the tail end of that. And also St. Patrick's Day, which is just behind us. The reason I mention these two, well, especially St. Patrick's, is this song is an old traditional Irish tune that I wrote. Oh. Yes. Will you sing with me? All you have to do is repeat the last line of every verse, and I'll prompt you when that comes up. It's called When Women Run the World. When women finally run the world will run much better. There won't be any lines to the ladies' room in theaters, 'cause architects will realize we take a wee longer. We'll stand up for our need to sit when women run the world. We'll stand up for our need to sit when women run the world. You got it. Oh, boxing, wars, and football will be outlawed right away, and injuring each other will be thankfully passé. The only legal way to beat the crap out of each other is a round or two of pillow fights when women run the world. A round or two of pillow fights when women run the world. Money will be spent on bread and schools and art and more, and gardens bloom where there were bombs and toxic spills before. Not a penny will be spent to anybody's detriment. Hooray, we'll all go shopping when women run the world. Hooray, we'll all go shopping when women run the world. Now TV shows and films will be noble things to make. No naked writhing bodies, well, maybe for art's sake. No crashes, blood explosions, no gore in every scene. Our children will be better things when women run the world. Our kids will witness better things when women run the world. Imagine such a magic world where toilet seats are down and children have enough to eat all the world around, where medicines, not guns, are cheap and plentiful for all. Just nurturing and gentleness when women run the world. Just nurturing and gentleness. Yeah. Cars will go at normal speeds and road rage will expire. Accessories for autos won't include humongous tires. We'll stop and ask directions whenever we are lost. This finger is for wearing rings when women run the world. This finger is for wearing rings when women run the world. So raise your glasses, toast the lasses, storm the backroom bars, make violence extinct, stamp out stinky cigars. Equal pay for equal work, a cleaner world for all. Bubble baths for everyone when women run the world. Oh, bubble baths for everyone when women run the world. Oh, bubble baths for everyone when women run the world. Bravo. Thank you so much. I'm sorry to make you move everything all around. Okay. Well, thank you to the Ethical Society for giving me this opportunity to speak to you. I feel a real home right here in the Ethical Society. It also gave me the opportunity to examine my own life more closely and how, according to the title of this, my personal activism, using the arts for social justice and ethics, but it really should have been titled the other way around, because ethics came first and then the arts and social justice came second, okay? So also it made me it kind of forced me to see what really drives me, what compelled me in my life. So, as was said in the introduction, let's go way back to when I was 4. So that's about 20 years ago, right? My first award, I won my first art award at age 4. And you know, who knew there was such a thing as competition in art? And who even knew that art was a thing? All I knew is that I liked to draw. So I did a crayon drawing of a clown holding up a whole bunch of balloons in front of a circus tent, and it won an award. So it made me think, oh, well, you know, there is such a thing as art and competition and exhibition. And it also made me think, well, you know, those of us that have children or work with children, sometimes you ask them, what do you think you're going to be when you grow up? And a lot of them, you know, they aim high, as they should. Oh, the best thing would be to be a doctor, or the best thing to be would be a teacher, or a librarian, or a soldier, or whatever it is that the children come up with. And when I was 4, I decided I was going to be an artist of some sort. Number one, that award gave me validation. And number two, the word artist was like the biggest thing you could be, the grandest thing you could be. Because if you were a chef and you were really good, people say, this person is an artist in the kitchen. Or if you're an athlete, that person is an artist on the field, so refined, so graceful, so expert. So I thought, okay, the best thing I could be is an artist. And as I went on and got older, I found out that art was a tremendous vehicle to get in people's hearts and minds. It's a wonderful vehicle to make connections and to get deeper meanings of something. It gives beauty and comfort and enlightenment, and that's no small thing. So let's go to the first thing would be ethics. At a very early age, my parents instilled values in us, as I'm sure your parents did as well. What is truly important? Kindness, compassion, empathy, generosity, fairness, education, and interest in and involvement in world affairs. My father was a war correspondent in China in the 30s during the Sino-Japanese War, and we would use the term embedded with the troops. And so he would travel along, much as what's going on in Ukraine right now, is there are journalists, photojournalists and journalists there covering the war, putting their own lives in danger, as my father did. Then he became an immigrant. He immigrated here after the Chinese Exclusion Act was repealed, and that's a whole nother story. That's what my next film, I hope, will be about. And then he was a journalist again, first an editor, a broadcaster, and then the chief of the China Bureau of the Voice of America. My mother was an early feminist and an activist. She advocated for fairness in housing. She bought a house in Levittown, right here on Long Island. And some of you might know that William Levitt had a covenant barring blacks from buying houses. That didn't sit well with my mother. When we moved down to Maryland, she bought another Levitt house, and again, the same covenant. So my mother was part of the picketers. They picketed Town Hall and got that covenant thrown out. And my mother's ancestors were pioneers. They came over from China. They established the very first Chinese fishing village in Monterey, California, until the townspeople burned it to the ground. And they had to move all over the place. So they were no strangers to discrimination and violence and racism. But my parents also gave us the love of culture and love of nature and exposure to that by giving us piano lessons and taking us to live musicals and museums and nature shows and so forth. So at age 12, which is a lot of children's age of awakening, I wrote my first song. It was called The March of the Tin Soldiers. And at age 13, I got my first guitar. And it was influenced mightily by the Beatles. Yeah. Bob Dylan, Pete Seeger, Joan Baez, Peter Paul and Mary, Judy Collins, Simon and Garfunkel, on and on and on. Well, what these musicians had in common, besides being wonderful musicians and some of them songwriters, was that they were all actively against the war in Vietnam. Now, I guess you could say that I was lucky to have been born into that era because the Vietnam War was going on, and there was such outrage in America against that war, kind of like what's happening now in Russia, right? People are rising up, speaking out, and not only did they give me a role model for their activism, but they showed me the power of collective endeavors, the collective action. And when we join together, we have the power to change attitudes and make overall social change. Now, I'm talking about all the arts, music, visual arts. Think about Picasso's Guernica, how powerful that is. Films, one of the early films that I saw, which impacted me so much, was Z. It was a narrative film, but it was based on the truth of what was going on in Greece. Some of you might remember there was a military coup in Greece. There was a democratically elected leader, and there was a coup, and the military took over. And when they took over, the junta took over, they outlawed the letter Z. Now, what is so ironic is that what's happening in Russia with that letter, right? They're writing it on their tanks because that letter to them meant, support for Russia. That's, so if they put it on their tanks, it's like, go Russia. And it was exactly the opposite of what went on in Greece. So my parents also took us to see South Pacific and The King and I, which subtly or not so subtly dealt with racism. Okay, the song you've got to be carefully taught to hate, right? So in theater, films, they were all very, very powerful and effective tools. One music teacher once told me that it's like a can opener for the mind. And it truly is. It opened my mind at a young age. So at age 14, I partnered with my friend and my neighbor, and we formed a folk duo. The first song we ever wrote was a protest song, protesting the war in Vietnam. And this was the start of my writing and performing songs with content, songs with meaning, songs that matched my personal ethics. So it wasn't enough, in my mind, to write songs and sing songs about colors and what else? What was folk music prior to that? Hang down your head, dum dooley, stuff like that, which is, I guess, a social comment. But I wanted to follow my role models, Dylan and Pete Seeger and Joan Baez. So then I went to art school after I graduated from high school, which is, by the way, where I met my darling husband over there, Stephen Fricker, who has been my, yes, you can applaud, he deserves it. So we met in high school, and he was my bass player for, 9 months or something like that, yeah. And then we met at our high school 20th reunion. We didn't have any contact before then, and now we're married. Anyway, so see what those reunions can do? You better watch out. So we went to art school in San Francisco, the San Francisco Academy of Art College, which was not accredited, which I found out when I went there to register. What do you mean I can't get a degree here? I had to go to a cooperative program with Lone Mountain College, which was accredited. And now it is a university and it is accredited. So if you're thinking of going to an art school, it's an incredible one. But I also learned, I was taught art history there. And I thought that was kind of strange. All the artists that we studied, maybe one or two, three maybe, all the artists that we studied in art history were white European males. And I thought, that can't be the only artists in history. The course was called Art History, right? So my thesis at Lone Mountain College was, why are there no great women artists? Well, of course there were, and they were honored and respected and did very well in their own time. But the historians have written them out, or had written them out, of the art history books. So thankfully, a lot has happened since then, and we recognize the contributions and the talents of women artists. So in 1979, I moved from San Francisco to Long Island and started my career in glass art. I moved from being a painting major and a photography minor to and psychology minor to working in glass. And I pretty much put down my activism and performing and all that kind of stuff to work in a stained glass studio for 6 years. But then music started calling me back. So in 1984, I opened my own company. 1986, I went back to music. And I was pivoting from and focusing from performing and writing songs for adults, and decided to go into performing and writing for children, because I firmly believe, first of all, children are our future, and if we don't teach them properly, if they don't have the proper values and the proper knowledge about world history and about so many other things, we have lost the future of humankind. So children, to my mind, are the most important audience that I could have. So I wrote 18 programs. I've written over 250 songs. A lot of them are for children and families. And so I made a whole school show, a series of school shows called Big Ideas. So these were shows about multiculturalism, about bullying, about nonviolence, about peace, about the environment. So 18 different topics. Nobody at the time in 1986, when I started doing this, was either writing or performing this kind of music, maybe Raffi, for children. But I thought missed a whole important audience. So, and nobody was doing it in the schools or in libraries, even if they were doing it in public, but not in the schools. So at that point, I found my life's mission. And so most of my life for the past 35 years has been performing this kind of music in the schools. And then in 2016, I discovered and ventured into filmmaking. And I now believe that is one of the most powerful of all the arts, because you are combining the visual, the audio, the storytelling. And I have seen people, in fact, when I premiered my film at the Cinema Arts Center in 2016, I sat in the front. I didn't need to watch my film again. I wanted to watch the audience. So I was watching the audience weeping, just crying over this film, because it's a true story about an immigrant from Colombia and all that he had to go through to become a success, the successful person that he is now. He is one of the top cardiac surgeons in all of New York State. So can you imagine what would have happened to all his patients? He saved so many lives. What would happen to them had he not been able to immigrate, had we slammed the door on him and his family? Well, since then, I've performed thousands of concerts and workshops for all ages. I continue to do my activism through my art, through teaching children about important issues, but also producing fundraisers. So I've done 5 for Ethiopia during their starvation, during the terrible, terrible famine, Haiti during the earthquake, Sandy, Puerto Rico during that earthquake, and recently did a fundraiser for immigrant justice. And I had said, after each one of these fundraisers was over, I had said, I am never doing another one. It took so much out of me and away from my own work. It was like, it exhausted me. But of course, now there's Ukraine. So I'm back. I'm going to be making another fundraiser, and I hope that many of you will hear about it and will join us for that. I know there are a gazillion fundraisers all over the place for Ukraine, but I think that you can't have too many. You can't help too much. I've written 2 books. I've had some successes and lots of flops, but the value is not, I never, even at the beginning, went into the arts for fame or fortune. Good luck if you're doing it for fame or fortune. It ain't ever going to happen, right? But the value is in the making of and the doing of the art, and then putting it out there, because then we can build community. I mean, the arts are a wonderful community builder. And one of the best things is getting to meet and having a community of like-minded people, other artists, other musicians, filmmakers, theater people, dancers, and allies such as the Ethical Humanist Society. I am so grateful for your support through the years. So, in conclusion, I ask myself and I ask each one of you, what is it that we can do to help the world? Because we actually can move by degrees, individually and collectively. You all know that. I'm talking to the EHS, for God's sake. So, you all know that. So, what is it that gives our lives meanings? The arts are one of the best ways to affect change because they really do reach into their hearts and minds and the spirits and touch people and amplify what we have in common and decrease, hopefully, what our differences are. So I urge all of you to support the arts and artists, because we are all part of the change makers. So thank you. One more song. Okay. He was a prominent Lutheran pastor in Germany, and when you hear the lyrics to this song, you will realize it was really written about World War II, but it is still so important today. But I think we have learned lots of lessons from that era. And so I did change the words a little bit to make it relevant to today. So I sing this in honor of Ukraine. I'm not a communist, so when they came for the communists, I held my tongue, minded my own business like a good neighbor. I trusted that justice was done. I didn't ask what was their crime, it was their sadness, wasn't mine. I didn't care where they were sent. By my silence, I give my consent. By my silence, I gave my consent. I am not Jewish, and so when they came for the Jews, I had nothing to say. Branded with stars like cattle in boxcars, and then taken away. I didn't ask what was their crime, it was their sadness, it wasn't mine. I didn't care where they were sent. By my silence, I gave my consent. By my silence, I gave my consent. I didn't care when they came for Ukrainians, came for Romanians, took the Hungarians. I'm not a terrorist, I'm not an immigrant, I'm native born, faithfully ignorant. I didn't care what was their crime, till their sorrow turned into mine. Their sorrow turned into mine. Well, I was okay, 'cause I was a citizen, and I was free. I didn't care. Now there's nobody there, no one to speak out for me. At the time, I believed it never could happen to me. I didn't know what it meant. My silence was my consent, for my silence to be my consent. By my silence, I give my consent. Thank you.